I'm Questlove, and that's the building where I live. It's a Frank Gehry building in downtown New York. He designed it in 2010, and it's one of the tallest residential buildings in the Western Hemisphere. I live up there near the top. When I travel so much, eating at home is like a luxury to me. So sometimes, when I'm not doing the 16 job thing, friends of mine, who just happen to be some of the world's best chefs, come through and cook for myself and some of our eclectic guests. It's like a highbrow potluck, where these illustrious culinary types dish on their dishes, their careers, their philosophies, and other tasty treats. Welcome to Questlove's Food Salon.
I was born in Rhodesia. I was quite young at the time, but I'm told it was a good birth.
I was born in a town called Bnei Yehuda in Israel. Living an international and sort of perpetually culture-shocked life has been very beneficial. I think that you're exposed to different things in a method that is outside of your comfort zone. For me in particular, looking at Israeli food as somebody with their foot in the door of American culture and Israeli culture has given me a different perspective on Israeli food.
My husband's always been really supportful. Before we went to Spain, we were working at Daniel, which is sort of an international experience inside of New York. I mean, you're making French food and you're hearing French all the time, but we definitely wanted to get outside of New York and see something different. I don't think it's necessarily like a requirement for all chefs to go abroad, but it definitely opens your eyes to different experience, and it's definitely challenging to immerse yourself in another kitchen where you don't know the language and you're just trying to figure out the basics, you know, like what is a spatula called? It's very challenging, but also extremely rewarding.
Around the same period that I fell in love with cooking, I witnessed a fellow line cook slice open his thumb so badly that blood squirted out of it. And I'm like, you gotta leave and go to the hospital. And he put a pan on the stove and got it super hot and fucking cauterized his thumb in the middle of like dinner service, which was at 2 a.m., threw the pan out, and then cooked for like another 6 hours. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? You make like $3 an hour. And he was like, I really like cooking, you know? And I was like, I have to be a chef after this. I thought it was so intense and so insane. It was badass.
I went to boarding school from a very early age, from age 7. Imagine Hogwarts, same thing, without the magic. And they used to do fried eggs in a big corrugated iron greasy tray, at least fried eggs with about that much grease swirling in them for breakfast. Everyone sat at long tables. You had a head boy on each table. He would look at us dead in the eye like this, every single one. Do this, like that, and pop every single yolk, and then go, let's go, and pass the eggs around. When I look back now, when I'm older, the food, let's say at dinner, where you would be forced to sit on long tables, forcibly brings you together, and we share in pain and we share in joy. Everybody in that particular house could look at the guy who just popped all the egg yolks and go, oh. It was a social bonding catalyst, the food was for that particular time, which is important for the growth, I think, of anybody, to be able to have that experience, which most people don't.
The moment that I realized that there was something very different about food culturally in Israel, on the Sabbath, regardless of how religious or not religious you are, everybody sits down and eats together. It sort of breaks all generational stereotypes. Like everybody goes to somebody else's house on a Friday night and eats. And because there's so many different cultures that make up Israeli culture, you're eating things that have been brought to Israel from many different places. We don't get that here in the States as much as I think that we should.
If something is good, it can cross boundaries. Therefore, it's not like you need the right person to explain it. The first time that I went to France, I was put into a kitchen with 22 other guys who didn't speak English, but we had the one common language, which was the food. There was just an understanding and a sensibility without words or gestures. When you approach the craft of cooking, there was this commonality between everybody and myself, even though we couldn't at that particular time really like have a conversation because I just didn't speak the language.
I grew up conservative, but always was sort of adverse to institutional religion. And I think that food and a few other life experiences have sort of brought me back to Judaism spiritually, but not in a religious way. And I think food is probably the easiest way to relate to those things.
Well, the dish that I'm doing tonight, I thought would be very appropriate for tonight's weather, for the crowd. It's an easy to eat dish, full of flavor and very light, but it has a real depth of flavor to it. The dish itself is a royale of king crab. So it is fresh king crab, sliced very thinly, with slices of foie gras and some very lightly pickled cherry tomatoes set in a consommé gelée of the king crab, topped with a cauliflower creme. It's something which you don't have to sit there and chew on like a piece of meat, because it's not nice to do that at a party where you want to be sociable, you want to nibble, have a drink, socialize, go back. That's the flow of the social calendar for this particular event.
So the dish that we're making tonight is a lamb shoulder that is brined and then smoked at our barbecue restaurant in Philly called Percy Street Barbecue. We then bring it to Zahav and braise it in pomegranate juice with chickpeas and then sort of glaze it. We serve it on top of Persian rice with black-eyed peas and dill. And then we're going to serve with it a little bit of tahina, pistachios, and sumac. This is one of the dishes that hasn't really changed in the 6 years that we've been open, and I think it's sort of done for like the table or, you know, a big family or a big party, and I think sort of in the spirit of the Food Salon, it makes a lot of sense.
It's something that we've been doing in the restaurant since we started getting in the fresh strawberries, but I've been just really into the combination of really fresh fruit with yogurt all summer. And it's kind of that weird season in New York where things are starting to turn into fall and we're getting the last of the berries and the last of the peaches, and I'm just trying to hold on to them as long as I can. But I think like any combination of strawberries and cream, like strawberry shortcake, that kind of stuff is one of my summer favorites, so I wanted to use that before it was too late. My style of food is very feminine, but it's not necessarily architectural in like a geometric sense. I feel like when I start thinking about a dish, I always think about it, I guess like an architect would think about building a building or putting something together, but in the end, it's also very like whimsical and feminine, and there's a lot of like curves in the plate. It's not very straightforward, so for me that feels very feminine.
Well, there was a stone full of gelatin seafood that was delicious. Smile. Smile. There was a stone full of gelatin seafood. I really enjoyed it. So that's a good story.
I'm adventurous in that when I'm traveling, I want to try the thing that places are known for. I was in Madison, Wisconsin when I did the farmer's market, which like the farmer's market is like all cheese, but I wanted the fried cheese curds, and I got a plate meant for 3 people, 4 people. I ate them all. I ate the whole plate over the course of an hour and a half and 2 beers, and then instead of being outside, went to my hotel room, laid with the shades drawn and moaned. So I left Madison 2 days later with a stomach full of fully formed cheese curds, like those things that turn into dinosaurs when you're a kid that you put in the water and they just blow up. Exactly. Yeah.
And you made it. There's an enormous amount of food culture and history that's built into all of these restaurants, markets, and stores that are all around cities. And so what you really need to have is something that curates all that into a meaningful learning experience. And so what we at the Museum of Food and Drink are going to do next year is launch an app that turns this into a food museum.
So you know Ghost Chilies? They were the world's hottest pepper until a couple months ago. Trinidad Scorpions got hotter.
Yeah.
Distilled it, we get a shot of it, and we take it down, and I'm still like ruined on the inside. I couldn't work for like 20, 30 minutes. I had to go eat ice cream.
Creating food to me is more about a sort of relationship, I think, with the people that are eating. It's not about the chef, it's not just about the food, and it's not just about the diner. I want to make memories in my restaurant. I want to do it with every single customer that comes in. And whether it's like somebody eating like a $1.25 donut, you know, or drinking a cup of coffee, or having hummus, or eating barbecue, or eating at Zahav, like I want them to always remember that moment. And you just can't do it, unfortunately. There's no such thing as like 100% or being perfect, but you know, every single day, I mean, that's what we're shooting for.
I think in general, I'm a pretty quiet person, so I feel like I can express myself in pastry. I'm used to being in the back of the kitchen, and I think that like being able to surprise people at the end of the meal, I don't think people necessarily expect it, that when they take that plate out into the dining room and they set it down in front of you, there's a certain element of surprise, even though it's something very classical that they could have seen 100 times. Part of doing the last course that makes me feel like very satisfied is that when people take it out and they're like, oh, I'm too full, and my comes back, the plates are always empty, you know? I think that's very satisfying.
Before there was TV, before there was the internet, before any of this, there were restaurants. And restaurants were the extension of dining at home. And you would congregate around drink and food. Restaurants were the extension of the public house.
I love the idea of communal ovens. There's a lot of places still in the world where people go to bake their bread, and socially it's sort of like it involves everybody. Everybody's doing the same thing. I think it's actually quite spiritual.
I mean, if you go down to the market in New York, you see such a different mix of people. I think that's the only place where I could think of where you have everybody, you know, out to get what they need for the day. My husband's from Detroit. And we went to the Detroit Farmers Market, and I've never seen anything like it actually since we were in Europe. It's huge, it was beautiful. Every kind of person from every walk of life is there, and it was pretty amazing.
I grew up in the center of London, and there was Berwick Street Market. If you know London, that's in the middle of the red light district in Soho. So my recollection of that idea of growing up was walking down the market, and there were guys there selling carrots and what have you here, and right next to it there was a prostitute standing in a sex shop doorway going, hello Sonny, how much? You know, for me that was my recollection of food. So I think it's very important that if you enjoy food and you want to cook for a living, from an early age to be exposed to real food. So a proper green market, a Tokyo fish market, a boqueria like there is in Barcelona. If you were to have something like that in every single city, I think it would create a much better food society instead of ordering in or going out for dinner. People want to cook more. That's something which is just about exposure. It's like, how does somebody learn about music if they've never heard good music before? You have to be exposed to it and catch a spark by doing it. For me personally, food preparation and service is about emotion. Every culture, every language, every religion, any place on planet Earth since the creation of life to now, food has been the one thing that has gone all the way through. You don't eat, you die. Simple as that. Food has a magic to it and an emotion to it that can bring people together that don't speak the same language. It has a way of calming people. It has a way of bringing communities together. Everybody, everyone, everything that's living needs food.